joined now by Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, who's a historian and senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, to discuss the utterly mad story involving Saracen Head's pubs. I say there's more than one Saracen's Head because it's actually a whole load of those pubs around the country. In fact, it's one of the most popular names for pubs. Been in place, a lot of them, for over 500 years. But bosses of various different pubs and their punters, their staff and others have all said they're going to rally around a landlord who's being taken to court by a, wait for it, convicted terrorist because he says he's deeply offended by the name and, of course, the sign showing a Turk or an Arab's head as a Saracen's Head on the side of this sign, this Saracen's Head in Chesham, in Buckinghamshire. The man complaining about this is called Khalid Bakr. He was jailed for 4 years for preparing jihadi propaganda, but apparently his sensitivities have grown since that time, and he's upset about seeing, he says, the depiction of a bearded Arab or Turk on the pub sign. He says it's racist and the depiction incites violence. He wants compensation of £1,850 from the landlord and wants to take on more than 30 other pubs with the same name if successful. Let's talk about this with Rafe. Rafe, it is absolutely extraordinary that this man claims this is such an awful pub sign. He's offended by it. He wants compensation. But, I mean, this is just a man on the make, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't make this up, you know. I mean, forget the Saracen's Head. He should be offended by, Islamist beheadings by his jihadist colleagues.
And the propaganda that he was pushing, for which he was sent to prison.
Yeah, precisely. And I'm so pleased to hear that the pubs are rallying round.
Yes.
Personally, I think the image of the Saracen's Head looks like a very noble depiction. There's nothing I would say.
It's a very fine looking, very noble looking man. I mean, what's not to like?
We just have to hope that, the courts take the similar view to the pubs here, because if the courts do end up supporting this cretin, then, as far as I'm concerned, it's game over for Britain. Because, a civilization that won't defend its culture, its heritage, its institutions simply will cease to exist.
Yeah, well, I don't have any trust in our courts. We saw, the case with Nigel Farage and the milkshaking and all these various different cases. We just had a case today where a man with loads of images of babies being raped doesn't even go to prison. I think our courts are absolutely not fit for purpose anymore. Neither are our judges. So who knows what happens. But the key thing of this is people fighting these cases, because often people are told, it's the same when you get some very dodgy employment tribunal cases where people are just on the make and they're claiming, sexism or racism. It's just totally and utterly, or transphobia, utterly made up, is actually, people are told, well, yeah, you can fight it, but by the time you've paid for the lawyers, by the time you've paid for this and that at the time, you're better off just paying the 1,800 quid the guy's asking for and walking away. But we need people to stand up to this stuff to stop it happening. And for these people, I think that this man should be prosecuted himself for wasting court time.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, Green King, unfortunately, has a track record of caving in on these.
This is the pub chain.
So, yeah, this is the pub chain who own the Saracen's Head.
Yeah.
They've renamed various other pubs, dealing in the response to Black Lives Matter and so forth. One woman complained about the use of the term midget for one pub, even though that was actually named after the car, the midget, rather than a little person. And they've taken the knee. They must stand their ground here. I mean, firstly, they don't have to fear a boycott because Islamists don't tend to go to pubs.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think it's fascinating how many people are saying, they'll support them. I mean, look, I'll help crowdfund for you guys. I've got 500,000 followers on X. I'm happy to help crowdfund you to support you. But we do need to stand firm on these things. And again, this rewriting, it's the same with the statue toppling and just rewriting our entire nation's past.
The problem is, we have a culture of fear that, envelops most aspects of our lives today.
Yeah.
It's businesses, it's our cultural institutions, the police and the academia. It's fear of causing offence to Islam, fear of being called racist, the worst thing you could possibly be called, fear of being targeted by extremists. Just remember that poor teacher in Batley who's still in hiding. Yep. Almost 4 years after showing an image of Muhammad in class, or the Wakefield boy who got death threats after scuffing a copy of the...
So people think this is a silly, funny little story. It's not. It's actually incredibly sinister, isn't it?
We need to regain, really, a sense of self-confidence in our culture, in our heritage and our identity, both being British and the West, the genius and exceptionalism of the West, because we have a heritage that should be robustly celebrated and robustly defended, and we have to stop treating Muslims, black people and other ethnic minorities as if they're China dolls and have to be protected in cotton wool all the time. We all get offended in life.
It's its own kind of racism, actually, isn't it?
It is, precisely. No one has the right not to be offended.
Yeah.
You know, we're always offended, aren't we, with some of the stories we're covering, but we just live with it. We don't take
Yeah, exactly. It is extraordinary. Really talking sense, as always there. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, thank you very much indeed. Again, Tom Slater, you'd think this is obviously a silly case involving a pub name, but actually, again, it's insidious. It's this just... We have effectively a blasphemy law, don't we? I mean, it is the protection of Islam law in this country by default anyway. This man's claiming this, but the idea that somebody who's gone to prison for basically pushing jihadist propaganda, who's saying, "Oh, I'm really offended by a picture of a handsome man on a pub sign," is ludicrous.
I know, it's absolutely ludicrous, which is why it's so important that this case really gets chucked out and rebuffed, because of the fact that he's quite clearly just spied an opportunity, dare I say it, to recoup some funds for whatever reason. Maybe, just maybe, this convicted jihadist doesn't have quite the delicate sensibilities that he's claiming to actually have. And that he recognises that, you know, this might be a cartoonish example, but our culture does leave the door open to people to take the mick.
It really does. People just simply go, no, shush. No, shush is not used often enough, I would absolutely say.